The oldest and strongest human emotion is fear. And the oldest and strongest type of fear is trepidation of the unknown. When we were children, our parents told us that monsters didn't exist. But we were sure that something was lurking under the bed or in the closet. Fear sees, even if our eyes are closed. Welcome to the realm of the arcane. My name is Lon Strickler. Join me as I examine unexplained creatures, strange manifestations, and remarkable realities. Imagine this next hour as a voyage of discovery to strange lands, seeking not for new territory, but for new knowledge of the supernatural. Come on board as we begin this adventure together. Hey folks, good evening and welcome to another episode of Arcane Radio. I'm your host, Lon Strickler, and I thank you for joining me here on the Paranormal King Radio Network. Now, before I introduce my guest, I want to mention an account. I recently received an eyewitness referral after a message was posted on Facebook in a group page, and the following information was originally posted there. I know that Dogman is real. In 2001, I saw one while hunting in Pennsylvania. It was about 7 foot tall, had a head like a dog and a long muzzle. It was very strange looking with gray and black hair with a 2 or 3 foot tail. It sounded like a demon from hell. I was 45 yards from it. I had it in my scope. It was one ugly puppy. It was standing looking towards me. It had yellow, wild-looking eyes. I had a 30-06 with me with a 4+12 Weaver scope on it. I believe it saw me. It took a step towards me and then took off to my left. I did take my safety off just in case. And he has the Moshannon, Pennsylvania, Center County. And it goes by initials TY. So, I was given TY's telephone number, and I later contacted him. He explained that he was hunting in an area that was part of a 110-acre farm that he once owned. Now, it was the 2001 deer firearm season, which is late fall. TY was in his deer stand at about 10:30 a.m. He noticed some movement in front of him, and he estimated it was about 45 yards from him. Thinking that it may be a deer, he adjusted his scope to take a look. He was shocked to see an upright pedal being about 7 to 8 foot in height and with a head that reminded him of a large German shepherd with a long muzzle. Now, the eyes were yellow-orange in color, and it was looking in his direction. The creature was human-like in stature with a muscular chest, arms, and legs. It had gray and black hair all over its body. The hand claws looked like oversized raccoon paws. The feet were long and attached to canine-like hawk legs. It was making a low, deep growling sound that T.Y. described as demonic. Now, the creature took one step forward, and T.Y. clicked the safety off on his rifle. Apparently, the creature heard and or recognized the danger and immediately took off in the direction left to TY. This was the only time that TY saw the creature. Now, he did state that he had seen what he believed was a white Bigfoot while hunting in the same area back in 1999. And that area has had reports of white Bigfoot in the past. We received upright canine reports from the areas around Moshannon State Forest and Sproul State Forest in recent years. And Center County is located within the Lichen Loop in central Pennsylvania. So it has been a hot area for the past at least 4 years. And apparently there were some sightings around 2001 and beyond. So we'll keep a close track of what's going on. Now, let's get started. Tonight's guest is Timothy Renner, who is a Fortean investigator, author, and associate. Timothy is an illustrator, author, folk musician living in South Central Pennsylvania. He has written 3 well-received books, with another book to be released soon. His illustrations have appeared in the pages of various books, magazines, fanzines, and comics, as well as on many record and CD covers. Since 1995, Timothy has been making music both solo and with his band Stone Breath. Timothy is the creator of Strange Familiars, a podcast concerning the paranormal, weird history, folklore, and the occult. He has appeared as a guest on many podcasts and radio programs, including Coast to Coast AM. Timothy is also a member of the Phantoms and Monsters Fortean research team. So, Tim, thanks for joining us.
Oh, anytime, Lon. I love talking with you. I love coming on the show.
Now, first of all, for those unfamiliar with you, can you tell my listeners how your interest in the strange and unusual began?
I mean, it happened when I was a little kid, and I didn't even know. I didn't know I was chasing folklore. I didn't know I was chasing cryptid reports or anything like that. I just wanted every story of everything weird that was happening in my neighborhood. So if somebody said they saw Bigfoot in the next town over, I want to hear every detail of it. Somebody said there was a ghost somewhere. I wanted to know where the ghost was. I really liked these true stories. I didn't at the time. I wouldn't even know what they were called. I just now I know it's there are these folklore and cryptid reports and so forth. And back then it was just cool to me. And then I fell out of it a little bit. Although I've always kept my interest in folklore. It kind of goes along in my mind with folk music. The two kind of go hand in hand. And but it was really after I wrote my first book that I kind of jumped in with both feet. I went from being interested and I'd follow it and I'd read Phantoms and Monsters pretty regularly and kind of keep apprised of what was going on. But once I wrote that book, I found so much so close to me that I was like, okay, that's it, I'm in. And then it's been a wild ride ever since.
Well, we live very close to each other. You're part of Phantoms and Monsters Fortean Research. I've known you since you wrote your first book. What is that? It's been about 4 years now?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, and you've had 3 well-received books altogether, and you're about to release another one, which you said possibly next week. It's titled Don't Look Behind You, Following Ghost Roads into the Unknown, True Stories from Toad Road and the Other Strange Places. And this is kind of a follow-up to your first book, Beyond the Seventh Gate.
Yeah, and in fact, I got new witness reports, and you funneled a couple my way. Thank you for that. The hyena witness and the winged humanoid or Mothman type witness. They were both right in the area. And then I combined that with some other witnesses who came to me, and I started having the beginnings of a book. And one night I was talking to Mike Cleland, and I was telling him about some of the stuff I had experienced. And he said, why don't you write about this stuff in your book? Why don't you write about your own experiences? And I said, I don't know, Mike. I just, I feel like maybe I'm too close to it, or maybe people don't want to, maybe they just want me to document other people's stuff. And Mike really encouraged me. He said, no, you really should write about your own experiences. So in the first book, there's a little bit, I talk just a little bit about, actually hiking, putting the boots on the ground in areas and like hiking Toad Road and stuff. But in the new book, it's a lot of like weird coincidences and synchronicities and some strange encounters I've had while investigating this stuff.
Well, you and I have talked about a lot of the new things that you've got in the new book. You have had some strange encounters, and especially in that one area you call Area 7.
Mm-hmm.
Can you kind of tell us a bit about what's been going on?
Yeah. Now, I mean, you talk about white Bigfoot. I can't say they're Bigfoot necessarily, but people keep seeing white things there. Now, and I saw, in fact, the guy who is my sometimes podcast partner, James, and I were there, and we both saw it at the same time. We actually caught it on tape. You can hear us both go, "What was that?" Something big and white moved across the trail very, very quick, very, very fast, I can't say what it was. I don't know that there's been Bigfoot reports around there. There's some things that act like Bigfoot, but I can't say it's Bigfoot for sure. But what we're seeing and what other people are telling us they're seeing there are either white or grayish white things. So it's really weird. Like one woman actually reported seeing what looked like a gray alien walking around there, which was odd. But beyond that, there's one night we were there and some kids walked up out of the woods, and we asked them, like, did you see anything weird? And they said, well, just that drone you guys were flying over our heads, and we did not have a drone. And they're walking out of the woods. I don't know who can fly a drone through the woods at night, or where they would position themselves to be able to fly it from that point. So they had something weird flying over their heads. We've recorded some weird sounds out there. I've left recorders out overnight, and we've gotten what sounds like, I just call it unknown speech. It sounds like some kind of speech, but you can't decipher what's being said, and that's at about 3:30 in the morning, something like that, out there where it's private property. Nobody should be out there. So, I don't know what anybody's doing out there at that time.
Yeah, you've kind of progressed over the years with that area, and some of the anomalies have. Well, yeah, there's a lot of anomalies that have come forth since then. The area which you investigate, as well as other areas, just like Hex Hollow and other places, it just seems to be constant strangeness going on at all times. And I know. I mean, I'm very familiar with much of the areas you've been involved with. Not near as much, but this part of the country is pretty unusual.
Yeah, I when I started my podcast, I remember people kept contacting me and saying, "What is it with Pennsylvania?" And I was like, "Well, maybe it's everywhere. Maybe it's not just Pennsylvania. Maybe if I was living in Kentucky or North Carolina or wherever else, that I would just find all the places to go there." But then over time, I think I really do. I think there's something about Pennsylvania, because when I lived in Maryland, there wasn't, it's a smaller state, but there just wasn't that much. There was some stuff. Don't get me wrong, and I'm sure every state has some stuff, but there is something about Pennsylvania. Maybe it's the geology. I've tried to think about why. We do have a big old line of quartz that cuts down through the middle of the state. If that has something to do with it, there's plenty of granite here, and we have plenty of creeks. We know that these things happen near creeks for sure, and we got plenty of those.
It is kind of bizarre. Now, I lived in Maryland for almost 40 years, and of course, I've had some encounters myself, but invariably, when you start comparing the amount of reports coming out of the state of Pennsylvania as compared to Maryland, there's no contest.
Yeah,
and Pennsylvania, it just seems to be much more unusual. It's really varied.
Yeah, and I mean, just between you and Stan Gordon, the reports you've collected, I mean, there's some really nutty stuff that goes on, and indeed, like in my new book that's coming out, that woman who contacted me about the Toad Man, and she called me. She was an older woman, and she said, have you ever heard of the Toad Man? And when she said that, I thought she was talking about
Loveland.
No, I thought, because she was saying about Toad Road. She called me and she said, I want to talk to you about Toad Road. But I thought that doctor that lived on the end, Dr. Belknap, a lot of people accused him of being a mad doctor and stuff. He wasn't. He was, innocent. He just happened to live near the end of the Toad Road. But there was a goofy rumor going around that he collected toads and toad statuary and stuff, and that's how the name Toad Road got there. I don't believe that's true at all. But in any case, that was one of the rumors about him. So I thought she meant him. When she said the Toad Man, I thought, oh, she must mean Dr. Belknap. That's who she's calling the Toad Man.
Oh, yeah.
And then at some point, I something about it. She said, have you ever been down the bottom where the road cuts real close to the Cadorce there? She said it gets real creepy. I said, yeah, I've been there many times. And she said, well, that's where the Toad Man lives. And then I went, well, wait a minute. So you're talking about like a creature? And she said, "Yeah, I'm talking about a creature." And she described this, something like the Loveland Frogman, this kind of toad creature. And the weird thing was, I found another report from early 1900s from between Clyde and Goldsboro, I think, which is like 8 miles north of there, where people were talking about a fish man walking out of the water. And then some of the early reports I had, which I assumed were Bigfoot reports, were they talked about green-haired things down there. And even a friend of mine, his father was there in the 60s, and he said he was on a motorcycle, and he said something was squatting by the road, and he said that was green or greenish. And at the time I thought, well, sometimes we'll get these like green-haired Bigfoot reports, which I always assume was like lichen or moss or something like sloths get sometimes,
Right.
growing in their hair. But now that, that's cast a whole new light on this. Now that this lady's telling me about this toad man, and she said, yeah, that was the big worry. She said, you wanted to get out of that bottom part before nightfall because of the toad man. And I had never heard that before, but I mean, it's bizarre. But then I found that other report in the newspaper of a fish man, just a few miles away.
I never heard of that phenomena before. And, oh, by the way, the illustrations, which are done by you in the book, are amazing.
Oh, thanks. Yeah,
you're a very accomplished artist, and you've done some great illustrations. But look, when I saw your toad man in the book, I thought, God, that looks like Loveland, or what people stated that the Loveland Frogman looked like.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's what I talked about a little bit. That it sounds really, really bizarre, but people have reported this, and there's something. Well, if there's kind of toad and frog people in folklore from different parts of the world, there's something from Japan, I believe. But the one I zeroed in on was a folklore creature from the Slavic area called the Voldenoy. And they were these kind of river creatures, and it said they would sometimes come out and grab people and pull them into the river, and they kept the drowned souls and so forth. And I mean, it's all folklore, but I have a pretty strong belief these days that these old folklore reports were kind of like the cryptid reports of the day that got turned into, these folklore stories over time. Because a lot of the behaviors of these things they're talking about are very similar to these cryptid creatures we're talking about today. Glowing eyes and, the different aspects of these creatures are things they talk about in these old, folklore reports. And I think they got exaggerated and they changed. And of course, our culture changes as well. So the way we talk about things is quite different. But it really kind of sets a precedent for me. It's like these things existed in folklore. They talked about these like upright kind of frogmen in various places all over the world.
The Cador's Creek, and then since they built Lake Marburg and with Project 70, after it begins again, after it comes over the dam, from that area the whole way to where it goes into the Susquehanna has a lot of folklore. Our family farm was right there where Gladfelder has bought the land.
Okay.
And where the dam is right now, and I've heard stories out of there for years, even before they built the dam. And I actually used to go fishing down on the Cadors. Used to go fly fishing down there, and where it gets close to Porter's Sidling, there's a railroad bridge that goes over top of it. And it's kind of a real secluded area, but man, I have heard and seen some really weird things that I can't explain. And of course, it's not really that far from where I had the encounter with the slave woman entity. So there's a lot that goes on that creek. That creek is well known for a lot of folklore.
Yeah, and I mean, most of the places in York County that you'll have stuff, other than like Delta, which is down by the river on the south part, and I'm sure there's a couple others I'm blanking on, but really most of these places are connected to the Cadors in one way or another. The east branch of the Cadors runs right through Hex Hollow. So
right.
The Seven Valleys, where I get a lot of reports of weird lights and stuff, and at least one Bigfoot report. Actually, I've got a Class B more recently, but there was a Class A from 1980, I think, in Seven Valleys, and tons of weird light reports from there. I mean, that's the most of everything I get from Seven Valleys. People talk about these glowing fields. The fields will be just glowing green and stuff. And of course, the Codorus runs right through there, like you said, through Marburg, which is, where you had the slave woman thing, and I mean, other people have reported weird ghost stuff around there because that's a whole sunken town in there under there, which has to do something weird, like with the energy and so forth, and that has to do something weird, with if we're talking about energy and ghosts and stuff. And then it runs on through York City and runs right by. It's a block or two away from Prospect Hill Cemetery, which has some, pretty interesting ghost stuff there, and then on up to Toad Road. So, Toad Road runs right by it right there. So, there's something about the Codorus Creek. There really is.
Yeah, there really is. I've never been able to understand a lot of it, but, I used to sneak on the Gladfelder land and do some investigations down on that hollow where it just comes off the spill. Well, it's not the spillway, but where it goes into the form of the creek. And it's a swamp area. That's where that tree is that I really got a bad feeling about. A lot of deer in that area, but it's just really a spooky area. I used to see, and I saw it myself, this blue haze that used to hover above that whole marshy area. It just wasn't a regular haze, but it always had a bluish tint to it.
Wow.
And it just freaked me out. And, I've heard about that for years. And it's got a lot of stories to it. The people that have lived in that area before they built the dam, they were mostly Mennonites, Dunkarts, or old German Mennonites, and Pennsylvania Dutch per se, and they had a lot of stories. I mean, the werewolf stories came out of there as well. My aunt used to tell me all kinds of crazy things that used to be seen on the family farm, which was right down in that hollow area.
Wow.
So, and I wish when I was a kid I'd have wrote it down. I really do. There's a lot of that stuff I forget now.
Right. Yeah.
But, there's one aspect, and you sent me a review copy of the book, and, the sighting of that winged being down there in near the area where you investigate that I had reported. And then you mentioned something I never even thought about this. It's not really that far from where the Conewago Creek empties into the Susquehanna. Do you believe it may have been that same creature, the Conewago Phantom?
I mean, it could have been. We're talking about something that's kind of similar that people are reporting, and it's not that far. I mean, so the Conewago's a few miles, north of the Codorus.
Right.
I mean, that's right in between them, and I mean, you had cataloged all those sightings, and it seemed like each one went a little further down the Conewago, like towards the river. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Almost consecutively. If you look at the dates, it's like, yours is right there at what's that area called?
Right, I was right there at the camp, the Boy Scout camp.
Yeah, right where the Boy Scout camp is, and then the next one's a little further. The next one's a little further until it gets to the bridge, which is scary. Anytime you see a Mothman around a bridge, that's a scary thing. And then it seems like it keeps on going down. And I would not be surprised if at some point somebody comes to you with a report that's in between those areas. You know what I mean? Like from a date before those persons saw it at Codorus Furnace, or close to Codorus Furnace. And then after the last one you connected, that was a little closer to the Boy Scout camp, because there's a big gap in there. But right. I wouldn't be surprised if somebody saw it, because that's a lot of creek along there. And then again, who knows? We'll see. I mean, it might have been something different, but it sure is close, to the Conewago.
I don't know why I never even thought about that till I read it tonight in your review copy you sent. I thought, holy moly, you just mentioned. I thought, well, I guess it's a good possibility it might be the same thing. I did have a report near Lancaster, just north of Lancaster, of something very similar years ago. I don't know what it was, but it did sound similar, but wasn't a very good report. But I believe somebody did see something. So the fact that was, across the Susquehanna, a few miles from the river, I don't know. I don't know if this, I don't know. I mean, but it's something to think about.
Yeah, it really is. And then the really interesting thing is I found that one reference to a dynamite factory, and I can't, like, I went to the York Historical Society. I said, I'd really like to find where this dynamite factory was. They have zero information on this dynamite factory. They asked me to give them all the information I had on it.
Where was it supposed to have been at?
Well, they said it was located in Mount Wolf, which is that's a little far from Toad Road, although, right. I mean, it's not terribly far. It's a couple miles, right? But then they said at Trout Run. Well, Trout Run is right there. That's on Toad Road. So is that the nearest town they were referencing? Is it somewhere in between? I'm not exactly sure where it fell, and I could never find out exactly where it fell, but it was a dynamite factory where somebody got killed. They had an explosion there. And the poor guy, they found parts of him up in the trees and stuff. And that was either the late 1800s when he died. But the thing is, like, I thought, now we're talking dynamite factories and TNT, and we're associating a Mothman creature with it. I just thought, man, what are the chances of that? Where this, like I'm thinking of the TNT area down in West Virginia.
Yeah, down in West Virginia.
And I thought, wow, what are the chances that there'd be some kind of like TNT connection to this? So I thought that was really interesting, but I do not know where the footprint of that factory actually was. It could be anywhere from Toad Road to Mount Wolf, somewhere.
Well, I'm going to have to take a look myself. I'm going to have to check that out. Maybe I can come up with something, but I had never heard of that. That's an interesting connection there. And and I've had, these winged being sightings have been in other places. Of course, in Littlestown, I had a very good report, though the thing was kind of pinkish in color. This thing crossed the road just outside of Littlestown, really very close to the Maryland line. So I don't know. I mean, is there a connection somehow? I mean, that's Adams County, but it is. Like you said earlier, it's just amazing some of the anomalies that turn up in this area in particular and all over the state.
Yeah. And I mean, presumably, some people have seen them flying. So if they're the same thing, they can fly. So it's a short hop from Littlestown to New Oxford to, the next one. If you can fly, that's nothing. But it's just, I mean,
and this is all around Gettysburg. If people don't know the area, I mean, this is just all around Gettysburg. So,
right.
Gettysburg, and I just moved recently, and I moved a little closer to Gettysburg. Maybe I'll eventually end up there. I don't know. I think I'm going to start spending more time there and doing the research. I haven't done that in a while, but I'd really like to get back out there and start looking again. I've
got an area. A fellow told me I was free to come and investigate. He says he's got multiple activities there in Gettysburg, and it's 20 wooded acres. And I think he said that the Confederates camped there when they went through. So if you're welcome. If
that's the case, that's west side of town then, or the western part of the outside of Gettysburg then.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, like I said, you're welcome to come with. He seemed like a pretty cool guy, and he said he'd be happy to have me come out. So
but that wouldn't be far from. That would be an area not far from Sachs Bridge as well. That whole area is spooky back there. It's the area that he's probably talking about is just west of town, or west of the Seminary Ridge, where the Confederate forces came east from when they went to Chambersburg and to Cashtown, and they started camped out west of Gettysburg. And that's probably the area he's talking about, spooky area. It really is. You get in there real early in the morning sometimes, it's just like, it makes the chills go up and down your spine like crazy. It really is. It's active.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Gettysburg in general, the whole feeling of the place changes when the sun goes down. It's very touristy during the day, very touristy, and there's a good bit of ghost tourism too. They have, they have a ghost economy there now. I think probably more than a historical economy.
I believe you're right. That's probably true. I mean, you get a lot of these metaphysical shots move in there, and it seems like everybody and their brother that's into any type of thing that's metaphysical has got something connected with Gettysburg now.
Yeah. It's big business there. But even with that, even with all the tours going on, even with the, all the tourism of every kind there, when the sun goes down, the mood really changes there. It really does. And especially if you're out away from people, you can feel it. It just, for whatever it's worth, the feeling just really changes.
Yeah, the area around the Gettysburg, down around the battlefield is good as well. I mean, at least that's not locked up at nighttime,
Yeah.
Actually get around those areas at night. But I believe it's a shame you can't get on the battlefield at night, because I used to do it when I was a kid, and there was no regulation back then. But God, I used to go and just take my tent and camp out, And
yeah, they used
it was crazy.
It wasn't too long ago. It was, I think honestly, it was with the popularity of ghost hunting. I think they had to shut it down.
I think that's the reason why they did it.
Yeah, because there's the ghost tours. They know exactly where they can be. They'll take you right to the edge, the park, and they know they're okay, where they can be and where they can't. But I remember, my wife and I going in there at night. This would have been early 2000s probably, and we could still go in there at night. It was legal. We weren't breaking any laws or anything. I think you had to be out after 10, but you were still allowed to go in. And I remember us we got some really neat orb photos. I remember this is a pre-digital camera. We had a film camera, and we were picking up some orbs and stuff on the battlefield. But yeah, no more. They don't really appreciate that.
You go to Gettysburg, go down 116, stop and pick me up, and I'll go with you.
All right.
Because, like I said, right now I'm only like 12 miles out of Gettysburg. So,
well, we should do we should set up a Phantoms and Monsters Fortean investigation team. Just meet up and just everybody go out there.
That would be really neat. I'm glad you mentioned that. That might be something to do. And the Gettysburg itself has had some really strange Bigfoot sightings.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, they get some weird stuff there, and it's, when we talk about Bigfoot in Pennsylvania, that's one of the biggest things that kind of has pushed me away from thinking that it's a natural creature. And I'm not saying it can't be. Maybe someday somebody brings a body in and they prove me wrong. But right now, there's something really, really weird about it. And I think it was one of the fellows out, maybe Brian Seach, one of the fellows out there was saying to me, he said, well, like, where do they come from and where do they go? And I said, well, that's the big question, right?
Yeah.
Where do they come from and where do they go? Because they're not, hey, I love York County and I'm glad we have tons of sightings here. For where we are, Bigfoot sightings, we got a good bit. I got a good bit this year. And I love it, and I believe these people. They're not lying. When they tell me these stories, you can tell. There's I'll tell you about another Albatwitch sighting in a minute.
Okay.
But anyway, I just don't believe there's a breeding population here. I really don't. No. So where are they going? You know what I mean? And people are seeing them all times a year, so they're not. I don't think they're migrating through. There's something weird going on with them. That's all I can say.
You and I, we go on the side of the interdimensional type thing, and Stan's been talking about that for years, and of course Sean, he will definitely not talk. He's definitely flesh and blood, but you're right. I don't believe there is a breeding population, and the fact that people are seeing something. Look, I saw something back in '81 down in Maryland. I don't know what the hell it really was. It looked like a Bigfoot, and it looked like it was flesh and blood, but who's to say what it was? There have been sightings in that area, Sykesville, for years, but, there's got to, if it's indigenous, it's got to breed.
Right.
To keep a population going there. Is this some type of, interdimensional being that comes back and forth. I think that's a possibility. I really do.
Yeah, I mean it sounds kooky in a way, but it doesn't sound any kookier to me than a breeding population of 8 foot tall ape men. You know what I mean? Like it's just they're both like kind of wacky things to be talking about. Again, I'm not saying I don't believe people. I absolutely believe people, and I believe when they see them, they're as physical as anything else, as the trees and whatever else is around them.
Mm-hmm.
But again, they don't act like regular animals. That's all I can say. Whatever they're doing, they're not staying here all the time. I don't think. If they are, they have some kind of, I don't know. I just can't imagine it.
Well, I think for the most part, the East Coast, people seeing the East Coast and Midwest are interdimensional beings. I really do. I've thought that for years. I believe there is possibly a breeding population in some areas, Pacific Northwest, Texas, down south, down into Florida. I think there very well may be breeding populations of some type of hominid. But right. As far as what people are seeing around the East Coast, all up and down the East Coast into the Midwest, I just don't buy into that. I just don't buy into the an indigenous flesh and blood species.
Yeah. It doesn't make sense to me. So get this, I was at the Albatwitch Day.
Mm-hmm.
Remember that report you took of that woman who saw that little creature just south of Red Line?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So they had interviewed me, kind of as promotion for Albatwitch Day. The local paper did, and it went to the AP. So it went all around. Like that story went all around. A lot of papers picked it up. And towards the end of the day, I was actually like folding up my stand and putting my books away and getting ready to go. This guy comes up and he's got the newspaper like tucked under his arm. He's walking with his daughter. He had a teenage daughter. And he said, I read this newspaper article, and he said, I didn't know what these things were called. He said, no one would, I didn't tell anybody about this except my daughter and a few other people. I didn't have anybody to talk about this. He said, I've seen these things. I've seen them twice.
Mm-hmm.
Both times he saw them in that same area of Red Line, Lon.
Is that right?
Yeah. And he did not hear anything about this before. He never knew about that other report. He told me the one, he said, I saw it when he was a kid. He said, I was about 10 years old and I was with my brother. He said it was standing out back of the store. He said it was about 4 foot tall, skinny thing, covered in hair. And he said it was standing like at the edge of a field or something. He said, my brother walked right up to it. He said the creature had its eyes closed. He said it reminded me of like a little kid when they close their eyes and like, you can't see me because my eyes are closed. That's how he kind of explained it. And he said his brother walked right up to it and looked it right in the face. He said his brother was face to face with it until he called to his brother. He said, come on, run, get away from that. And he said to this day, his brother will not talk about it. He's tried to get his brother to talk about it multiple times. His brother won't talk about it. He saw it again when he was driving as an adult. He said it ran out of a cornfield, kind of a little bit in front of his car, ran back up the bank, and then back into the cornfield. It got another good look at it again. He said, I've never known that they had a name. He said, I didn't know other people had seen these. And this guy was so earnest and so truthful. My wife was standing next to me. Now, I've mentioned this several times. My wife's a skeptic. She'll be the first one to say, we're all crazy for being into this stuff. She doesn't mean any harm by saying it.
I feel you, man. My wife was the same way.
yeah. That's just, she doesn't believe, and that's fine. I like having a skeptic around. It's a good thing.
Right.
Keeps me in check. But she turned to me later, like after he left, and she said, I don't know what he saw, but he saw something. Mm-hmm. She's like, I believe he saw something. He was not telling a lie. He was not telling a story. He saw something. And his daughter was like kind of encouraging him to talk to me, like Dad, you need to get this out kind of thing. I gave him my card. I gave him my number. There was rock music playing on the street. It was really loud. They had bands. So it was hard to talk to him. But I said, I begged him. I said, like, here's my personal number. Please call me. I live right in town. I'd love to talk more about this. I don't know that he will. I think I got the impression that he just kind of wanted to get it off his chest and be done with it. Hopefully he'll contact me. Maybe he'll hear me. I gave him my card for the podcast. Maybe he'll hear me talking on there and decide to contact me, or maybe his daughter will encourage him to contact me. I don't know. But both of those sightings were, one was right in the exact area that woman saw it on that road. I mean, within less than a mile, like right there. And then the other was, a couple miles to the south of that, but it's just in the same general area.
Well, if I remember that report right that I had received, this thing was really small, and she saw it. She thought it was she didn't really know what it was, but it was a hairy hominid, very short, and this thing ran across the field at a great speed. Just freaked her out. She had to pull the car over to watch this thing.
Yeah.
And she was watching it. It had to be at least 5 minutes or so.
Yeah, she got a good long look at it.
It was booking. I mean, it was booking, so God knows what it was.
So I'm going to beat the pavement since, it's right where I live here.
Yeah, you live in Red Line.
And see if I can get some other people to talk. I think it'd be really interesting, like from that area. I'm just gonna hit the shops and stuff in that area. I've had some success in doing that. There was an old UFO landing site in Gatchellville that they mentioned in 1978, and it had kind of been forgotten. Like some people in Gatchellville was like, yeah, it was somewhere around here. The people at the Gatchellville General Store, which is just an antique store. It's not a general store. It's a great antique store. Very super nice people. They're the ones who originally told me about it. They said, yeah, there's a UFO landed somewhere around here. And I was like, well, where? They didn't know. But there was a pizza shop down there, and I just happened to, the owner was coming out, and I just happened to ask her, and she said, well, I think it was over the hill there. And I had someone from Maryland had come up and taken photos of the landing site, in 1978 when it happened, and he had sent me a photograph of it. So I knew, kind of what it looked like. And then I was able to actually find the landing site. And that was just by knocking. Yeah, I didn't have to knock on a door. I saw her outside her pizza shop, but it's the same kind of idea. So I thought, well, you know what? I'm just going to start asking around here. Maybe somebody else will say, hey, I saw something weird too, and see if more people have seen it. Because I think it's very, very strange. Like this guy didn't know anybody had ever seen it. And when I told him, where that report was that you took, he said, well, that's exactly where I saw it the second time, I believe, when he said it ran out of a field. That was right there, he said, within, less than a half mile, I believe.
I think it'd be really interesting if we could get people in this area to start opening up more and more about what people are seeing, because there have to be a lot of things that we're not hearing about.
Oh, I'm sure there are. But that's the thing. Like, so a lot of Pennsylvania Dutch, they don't want to talk in general.
Sure.
and then, but when you get people to talk, almost everyone has something weird that has had some kind of experience. It's really, really strange, because even people who say they don't believe, you poke them a little bit, and then they'll say, well, what's this one thing that happened? And then they'll tell you something. I mean, my wife, the skeptic, she is the first person I know that saw what we've been talking about on my podcast, that flannel man, that thing that people see. It looks like a lumberjack or whatever, and now she doesn't believe it was anything other than some kind of hypnagogic thing or, sleep paralysis or some sort of thing like that. But she is pretty amazed that, I've gotten 40 some reports now of people all over the country, all over the world, who have seen the same thing. This guy dressed in flannel, and they describe, it's not always the same, and it's not always the same exact description. Some describe him as tall with a beard, others, shorter with no beard. But it's a guy wearing a flannel shirt, a red flannel shirt for the most part. Although I have gotten a few brown and I think blue, but like 95% plus, it's a red flannel shirt or a red checked shirt, and either blue jeans or blue work pants. I don't know what that is, but
do you think it's a specter of some type?
Yeah, my feeling, and this is just based on, so a lot of people report that it looks surprised or caught when they see it. Like when it knows that you can see it, he looks surprised or caught. So my thought is it's some kind of watcher, some kind of observer.
Right.
For what reason, I don't know. Most of the people don't get a sinister feeling from it. They're surprised because it shouldn't be in their house. So they wake up and it shouldn't be there. So they're not, they're certainly surprised and scared by it being there, but they don't get a particularly like evil or sinister feeling from it. And, so I don't know what it is. I'm collecting reports because a lot of people, have seen these things. But like I said, my wife, she was the first person I ever knew who saw that, and I talked about it a little bit on the podcast, and that's what opened up. Then somebody else was like, "Wait, I've seen that," and then it started like snowballing. And I wasn't the first person to do that. I mean, John Keel had talked about ghosts and check shirts, I think. So I'm sure he was probably talking about the same thing. And in fact, I read it. The reason I knew it was more than just a dream my wife had is I read about it somewhere. I forget where, some internet forum or something, 15 years ago or whatever. I read about it. And then somebody said, "Oh yeah, people are seeing this lumberjack guy," and I kind of put it in the back of my head. But I mean, that's just another example. Like even my wife's a skeptic. She's seen this flannel man. I had a guy call me who he wanted to talk about like the history of Toad Road, because he grew up in the area. He's retired and he's in Florida, and he said, "Oh, you don't believe in all that supernatural nonsense in regards to it." I said, "Well, that's what I write about, and I have to believe my witnesses. I don't believe they're lying." So he's like, "Oh, that's nonsense." And then he tells me a story about a ghost cat that jumped on his bed. He was petting it. He didn't have a cat. He wakes up, he's petting this cat, and goes to sleep, wakes up in the morning, starts looking for this cat. No cat, and all the windows and doors are locked. There's no way a cat could have gotten in. And he thinks, "Well, I must have dreamed it." And then his wife comes down in the morning and says, "Why were you petting a cat last night?"
Yeah.
So
that happens a lot. I mean, not necessarily a cat, but
right.
These things that show up, phantoms that show up, and it's some. You were mentioning about these things acting surprised you. Look, I mean, that's a phenomenon Stan Gordon and I have been talking about recently. As far as cryptids, I mean, I'm talking about Bigfoot, spirits, even some bipedal canines, where these things notice that you notice them and they act surprised. That's something that we haven't been experiencing or been told about until recently. It's a strange phenomenon. There's more and more reports that I receive now that when somebody sees one of these beings and it realizes that you recognize it, it acts surprised. You can see it in the eyes. You can see it in the expression, the way it moves. That's something else that just kind of makes you think, well, maybe this is some type of interdimensional being of some type. Right. That's that feels that it's cloaked somehow, but you recognize it and you see it, and it surprises them. Yeah.
I mean, that's it seems logical. You know what I mean? Like that's
it's weird, but it's and there's something else. I mean, we've also been talking about, and I've mentioned this on the radio show before, these the fact that these light anomalies or orbs are showing up more and more around cryptid sightings. I mean, what's the connection there? Is it interdimensional? Is it alien of some type? Is it non-terrestrial beings? There's no way at this point to really see what kind of connection it is, but the fact that they're showing up even days after a sighting, makes you think that there's something else going on there. And I've always thought, I'm quite sure you two have as well, that many aspects of the supernatural and the paranormal are connected.
Yeah. I think the longer, if your approach is like ours, so we look at everything, right? So we don't specialize. It's not just like we're Bigfoot guys. We're not just whatever. We look at anything weird that comes our way, ghosts, Bigfoot, UFOs. And if you do that, I think it's really hard not to see connections. Because they'll start acting the same way, even though they're different phenomenon. Poltergeist activity, you get knocks on the houses and stones thrown inside the house and bad smells. And then it was Josh Kutcher who pointed that out to me, because I had a experience in Hex Hollow where I got some knocks, would sound like stone knocking, and then I heard a wood knock, and I got a bad smell, and I was saying, man, I had a Class B Bigfoot thing, and he said, well, you don't know that. He said, if that happened inside a house, you'd have called that a poltergeist. And it really changed that kind of changed my whole way of thinking about the situation. I was like, yeah, you know what? I don't know that. I don't know what it was, because I didn't see anything. I only had, I was scared. I remember I got, terrified. during the incident, and I wanted to run, but I couldn't. I wasn't being brave. My knees just locked up. But it, yeah, I mean, and that's what got me thinking. I was like, you know what? There's too much in common across the board here. I mean, I just, I can't prove they're related, but we can certainly say that they like to be in the same places around the same time.
Well, you mentioned that we kind of look into everything. Mm-hmm. Now, you were a part of that the investigative team with the Chicago winged humanoids.
Yeah.
Well, what's your thoughts on that whole thing?
Oh my goodness! I mean, the winged humanoids in general, they're a real. I mean, not a problem in as much as I think the witnesses are good, and well, we took some flack because we weren't sharing witness names, and I always say, well, name me the research group that shares witness names and phone numbers.
That's something I've never really understood, why we heard so much bull about that.
Yeah, it's complete nonsense. To me, it was like people stomping their feet. I want it. Well, if we start giving witness names away, we're not going to get any more witnesses.
No,
it's not easy to get witnesses to come forward. It's not an easy thing. You've worked for years building up Phantoms and Monsters, for some place where people can go and they know they can report this stuff. If you start giving out names and addresses and phone numbers, it's going to be the end of Phantoms and Monsters.
Exactly.
Yeah. You can't do it. And the fact that people expected us to do that was outrageous to me, because no one does it. I mean, go to any of these Bigfoot organizations across the country and ask them for their witness list and watch them laugh you out of the room. And I don't blame them. I don't blame them, because that's what it is.
Well, unfortunately, I think some people kind of felt that we were invading their territory or phenomena for some reason.
Yeah.
We know who it is, but it's just that. Yeah, it's not only childish, but it's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
And it's something that I would never do.
And I've mentioned it before about we couldn't get the police report. I've said this before, on several shows with you and so forth. No one can get police reports. We filed FOIA requests for tons of police reports, local ones right here in York County, the one in Chicago. The police don't give you those reports. There's nothing you can do about it. We can't afford to hire a lawyer to make them do it,
And that's the only way you'd be able to do it.
Yeah.
You'd have to take them to court to get it.
Exactly. Because, they're supposed to, but they don't. They just don't fill the FOIA request, and there's nothing we can do about it. We can ask, and we did ask. That's all we can do, And just because they didn't fulfill these FOIA requests for other people doesn't mean the police reports weren't there, or that the people never reported to the police. I mean, I've talked to several police officers who said, we don't file those reports because it's a problem.
Yeah.
We'll take the reports from people, but then we don't file them because it looks bad. It looks bad for us, and we'll have to address this in a way that becomes a problem, for their career, basically. And it's just easier for them not to. So,
well, I think these police officers, the two specific police officers that had the encounter, I think they actually did file it, but I have no doubt that it went into the circular file, because as soon as that was written up, they got rid of that.
Yeah, I think that happens a lot too. They just squash them. They're like, nah, this is
Well, there was a concerted effort with City Hall and the officials in Chicago to tamp this down as much as possible. I mean, I heard that straight from, source, because one of our witnesses happened to work in City Hall and worked in the office of the mayor. And she wasn't going to give her name out to anybody, but I was able to check up on a few things with the phone number, and it turns out she really did work for the city. And, her thing was, there's just no way I am going to let people know that I made this report. But she said, I will tell you one thing. City Hall knows about it. The mayor knows about it. The cops know about it. We tried to get access to video, that was controlled by the city.
Oh, yeah.
Never happened. It wasn't going to. I tried, actually, I can got a hold of several security companies with that had actual security with buildings where some of these things took place. They weren't going to give it to me.
Yeah, I mean, you can't make people do it either.
No.
So the fact that people had a problem with that, it's just, I mean, they were looking for problems. What I mean? To point, because they were upset that they weren't getting the reports. I believe that's my belief.
But I have to tell you, it was damn fun when I lasted. This was definitely something that we have never experienced, especially in an urban area like that. Oh my Lord! I mean, that was entirely different.
I know. I remember asking at the time, because you got a good bit of years experience on me with this, and I said, Lon, has this ever happened before? You said, not like this. Because that's what was the feeling at the time. Like, man, these are coming in fast and furious, and they haven't stopped, but they've slowed down.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of migrated somewhat to the north up into Wisconsin. We had the one real good sighting in Milwaukee, but I don't know. Is it something that's going to start back up? Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think it was a hysteria thing. I don't think it was where a few reports got out, then everybody thought they were going to do that. I just don't believe that because of, the way we got the reports and how they didn't embellish on the reports, very forthcoming. And that when you told them, well, there have been other reports in the area. Well, I never heard of that. And you could tell they'd never heard of it.
Right. And and once again, we did have people on the ground there. I mean, they were going to the site of every one of these.
Yep.
There are some people who claim they did that, but
yeah, well, that's right. And
yeah.
but you and I both are involved with a project that's going to eventually, I hope, manifest into some type of TV or movie production. And it's going to include this thing in Chicago. So maybe at that point, when it gets out, maybe some other sightings will surface. I'm kind of hoping so.
I'm sure, because as many sightings as we got, I'm sure there were more. There's always people who don't come forward. It takes them a long time before they want to talk about something. And there's some people who have to be really encouraged. Like I said, I think that fellow with the two, Alba Twitch, we'll call it the two mini little hairy guy things. I think it was really his daughter. That was just my impression. It was really his daughter kind of encouraging him to go talk to somebody about this.
Yep. And a lot of times that's what it takes to get somebody to open up and talk. Somebody in family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I've had that happen many times.
Yeah, absolutely. Because these things aren't easy to talk about because a lot of people aren't going to believe you. They're just not.
That's just it. That's the name of the game. That's what we go through every day.
Yep.
Well, Tim, why don't you tell my listeners how they can get in contact with you, where they can find you, and how to get your books?
Sure. So the easiest place is my podcast website, which is strangefamiliars.com, and all that contact information goes directly to me. So if you want to get books directly for me, that you can email through the podcast or, however you want to contact me. They're all on Amazon as well. You can either look up Timothy Renner or look up the individual books. My first book is Beyond the Seventh Gate. My second was Bigfoot in Pennsylvania. My third was Bigfoot West Coast Wildmen. And the new one just about coming out is called Don't Look Behind You. It's a companion volume to the first one, but you really don't have to have the first one to read the new book. You can read the new book independently. But they do make a nice companion if you want to get them both.
Yeah, they're excellent books. I've recommended them a lot, and I kind of got through what you sent me today, but I'm going to definitely read all of it, and I will definitely read the book when it comes out. So, hey, Tim, thanks again for joining me.
Oh, thanks for having me.
You and I will be talking many times in the near future.
All right.
You take care now.
Have a good night.
Mm-hmm. Listeners can now show their support for Arcane Radio by becoming a patron. Simply go to phantomsandmonsters.com and click on the Podbean patron banner. Now, before I go, let me leave this with the listeners. American-born author, historian, and poet Aberjani once stated, "Human beings, in a sense, may be thought of as multidimensional creatures composed of such biotic considerations as the individual need for self-realization, subdued passions for overwhelming beauty, and a hunger for meaning beyond the flavors that enter and exit the physical body. A person might even be described as a self-contained multiverse. I thank everybody for listening to the show. Good night and have a great weekend.